This is an incredibly long video, so I wanted to let you know there will be timestamps down below where you can skip to specific sections, and I will be releasing this in portions, each segment on YouTube as well. But don't miss out on this. This is an amazing video. Plus, there's some B-roll at the very end.
It's pedal to the metal, keeping on that grind. Gotta keep it moving, never looking behind the story. It's the blade and the sparks, they gonna fly. There's beauty in the making when you're taking your time. Sure as heck beats working 9 to 5. It's easy when you love it and you're busy living that sharp life. It's easy when you love it and you're busy living that sharp life. All right.
All right, guys, as advertised, we are with a legend in the knife community, Bob Terzuola, the godfather of the tactical knife, the tactical folding knife. And it is an absolute honor to call him a friend and to be able to be in his shop and film right now. So Bob, I just want you to kind of just walk us through how this all happened, from starting in South America, like how you grew up starting in South America till now.
Okay, well, I can do that. Are you prepared for about a 2-hour video here?
Yeah,
maybe not.
We can do that.
We'll keep it short. Basically, I got a good background in tools, machines, materials, different processes like tapping and filing and soldering and welding and so forth at New York University. I got a scholarship to a vocational education program, and I graduated with a degree in basically industrial arts. I went into the Peace Corps, spent a couple of years in Panama, then I spent 1.5 years as a Peace Corps trainer, and went down to Guatemala. And everybody says, how did you wind up in Guatemala? Basically, I was chasing a girl. Okay, that didn't work out, but Guatemala did work out. I worked on a number of programs down there, some agricultural programs, education programs. And then I was asked by some friends to manage a jade jewelry factory, which they were just putting together and having trouble with in terms of marketing and techniques. And then nobody really knew how to work the material, but I did. I had been carving jade for quite a few years, just as a hobby. So I got involved in the jade jewelry factory, and the machinery that was involved in making jade ornaments and different types of jewelry and so forth was very similar to knife making equipment, grinders, polishers, tumblers, and so forth. And I had a good background in using abrasives and diamond and so forth from my jade carving experience. And I got a couple of pieces here. Let me show you. This is a jade tsuba that I made for a Japanese sword. This is called mutton fat jade. And I carved this quite a few years ago. And another little one I've got here is a seahorse. And that's pretty much white jade. I really like the white jade and the mutton fat for carving. Anyway, I was managing the factory, and our next door neighbor was a very interesting man. It's a long story and I won't go into it. His name was Jim Atwood. He was a colonel in the Army, and he had written the definitive book at the time on German edged weapons of World War II. And he used to get the American Blade magazine. Now it's called the Blade magazine. But in those days, we're talking late 70s, early 80s, it was called the American Blade. And he gave me a couple of copies, and he kind of convinced me that I should try my hand at it because I had the equipment there, and he was really into knives. And he said, make me a couple of knives and play around, see what you can do. So I did. And got involved basically in making hunting knives. And then I knew a number of operatives down there who were working with the Salvadorian army, undercover people. I was working with. I did some work with a company called Concessa, which was they did kidnap negotiations. They did investigations. It was basically an investigating organization, private. And they asked me to make some knives for them, and I did. And then I made friends with a bunch of Marine security guards at the embassy. And they were very interested in knives, of course, so I made a bunch for them, and that kind of snowballed. And that's basically how it got started. From hunting knives, I went into kind of military, I guess you could call it defensive or tactical knives. And I came up with a model that I call the Model 30, Battle Guard. And the first two were made for the Soldier of the Year and the Non-Com of the Year at Fort Bragg, Special Forces. And the first two went to those guys. And it became a very popular model, and it was one of the more popular models that I made in my entire career. So that gives you, kind of a thumbnail sketch of how things got rolling.
So what would you say was the first tactical knife that you made? Which one was that? The
Model 30.
The Model 30.
Yeah, now that was a fixed blade, and that's this one right here. I'm going to show this one. This was a table display. This was the original Model 30. Do we have a good view of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got a really good
The
view of it.
original Model 30. And I had this as a table display, and I showed how it could be pounded through a sheet of stainless steel without any damage to the tip.
That's pretty impressive. So you were doing the cold steel stuff before cold steel was.
This was long before cold steel was even invented. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, there we go.
There we go. Bob invented the hard use test as well.
Well, not only the hard use test, but also what I did was I took it out to the range and made a setup there where I could shoot at it. And I had this set up in a vise, and I fired at it with a .45, and I was able to retrieve
The split bullets.
some of the bullet parts that had been split by the knife. And I doubt that you can see it, but on the blade,
Oh, you can see it. It's really
see the
clear.
scuff marks there?
It's very clear.
Yeah, that's from the bullets as I split them. I actually hit it most of the 8 times that I fired, but I was only able to retrieve parts for 3 different bullets.
For 3 different bullets.
When I came up with the ATCF, I had a friend who he had a plastics factory in Romeo, Michigan, and he was also kind of an operative, you could call it. He was a helicopter pilot. He worked with the Karen in, I believe it was Thailand, kind of rebels. And he got the idea of making injection molded sides for the ATCF. And what he did is he made a very interesting material. It was basically the first time, usually injection molded parts, especially for knives, are made from glass-filled nylon, 30% glass fibers to add strength to the nylon. What he did was he used carbon fibers instead of glass. And as far as I know, that ATCF was the very first folding knife, or any kind of knife, to use carbon fiber in any way. And it was injection molded, 2 sides that went onto the, like scales on the side of the knife. And as Susan mentioned, hard use test, I drove my K5 Blazer over the edge of the knife and the handle, and we took pictures of it just to show how sturdy the material was and how strong and resilient it could be. So that was another hard use test that I came up with.
It's a pretty good one. You're going to get flexing and cracking in most materials if you're doing that.
Yeah.
So that was the ATCF folding knife?
Correct.
So was the ATCF your first folding knife design?
No, it was actually the model number 3. I called it the TTF3, Terzuola Titanium Folder. And that was a series that I made. There was the TTF1, that was the first titanium folding knife. It was kind of a utility blade, a bit of a spear point. Not very tactical, but a good carrying around, everyday carry type of knife. Number 2 was a Mariner design, and that was quite successful. Had a sheep's foot blade and also titanium handle. So it was a TTF series is what I called it. And the number 3 was the beginning of the tactical knife, and that was the ATCF. And believe it or not, I'm still making them, and people still want them, and they're still in high demand.
And now they're called.
And they're going to be coming.
Now they're called.
What are they called now?
TCFOG.
I didn't come up with this. Somebody came up with it. ATCF. Susan came up with it. Okay, ATCF OG, meaning
the OG.
original gangster.
So
okay, that's the popular use.
we took a quick break. We're back. So you're talking about the TTF series and how it was designed to be used, because that was the original folding knife. It was originally the TTF.
The whole series, the TTF series, Terzuola Titanium Folders, was basically intended to be taken out and used, carried, everyday carry. It was intentionally unadorned. It was plain titanium. I used the best, most exotic space-age materials that I could. In those days, titanium was a brand new material. There was only one other person using it, and that was Michael Walker. And Michael Walker and his wife Patricia were doing beautiful work with it. But in a more adorned, designed, artistic sort of way. Patricia, Michael's wife, was an excellent engraver, and she developed a technique of anodizing it selectively with a charged, electrically charged paintbrush with the anodizing liquid, and she would make an engraving of. She had one that was absolutely stunningly gorgeous called the Tree of Life. It was a big, beautiful tree with all sorts of birds and things around there. And she was able to selectively anodize different parts of it. So she had like the greenish leaves and the bluish sky and the birds and so forth. And she was able to do that in a very colorful, artistic way. And Michael and Patricia were the only ones using titanium at the time. And I went up to Michael's shop in Taos, New Mexico. I was living in Santa Fe at the time. And asked him to show me, first of all, how to use titanium, but mainly how to make the liner lock, which he had invented. And that was the genesis, the beginning of the TTF series. But I didn't want to have an adorned artistic. I wasn't looking for for artwork. I was looking for a usable knife that people wouldn't be afraid to take out in the woods, or truckers on the road, or packers or riggers or anybody. Take them to work, keep them in their pocket, and use them every day. So I purposely didn't adorn them. I didn't put any kind of scales or anything else on them. That came much later. Yeah.
So do you I mean, I know we've got some knives laid out here, because I mean, we've kind of worked our way. Now, okay, before we look at the stuff that's on the table, you've got production models that are out now, and you've had other production models. So what was the first knife that became a production model?
The first one that I did, it's a long, interesting story. I'll try to make it as short and concise as possible. I was at a SHOT Show, and I had made friends with Sal Glesser. We were getting, I'll never forget this, we were up at the hot dog stand, we were getting hot dogs for lunch, and Sal was kind of lamenting the fact that he couldn't get any custom knife makers to design a knife for him. He really wanted to have a Spyderco designed by somebody who was making custom knives. And I said, how come? He said, well, the Spyderco knife has to have a hole in the blade. That's our trademark. That's our brand. That's what signifies a Spyderco knife, and it's our patent, and we have to have it. And most knife makers don't like to put a big hole in their blade. I said, I understand, Sal. I know I've been telling you for years you make the ugliest knives on the market. He said, well, can you? I said, well, yeah, if you want, I'll design a knife for you. He said, really? I said, yeah, why not? So this was 1989. And I came up with a design. It had kind of a sheep's foot blade, very nice design. It's an everyday carry size, about 3.5 inches. So Sal said, okay, it looks like we're going to do it. So this was the first Terzuola knife that became a production knife. I happen to have one.
So you have in
right
the original
here.
box even.
I happen to have one here. This was given to me on my 70th birthday. We had a big party in Albuquerque. Sal and his wife Gail came down, and somehow or other, they dug one of these out of their vault, and they engraved it here. Happy 70th. And they gave me this for my 70th birthday.
That's awesome.
Okay, so this was known as the C15. Sal's, now this actually is kind of a historic knife, and here's the reason why. Sal said, what are your requirements for this knife? How would you like to see it made? And I said, well, first of all, I'd like to see it made in the United States. Up until then, all of the Spyderco knives were being made in Japan, Seiki City, Japan. They weren't making any here. I said I would like it made in the United States. I said, number two, I would like the blade to be made out of ATS 34, which is the same as 154 CM, which is a steel that I had been using. Bob Lovelace was the one who introduced it. But it's a steel that can't be stamped. It's a highly resilient steel, space age. They developed it for the turbine blades on the 747 engine, and it doesn't stamp well. And blades up to that point. Now remember, this is 1989. Blades on all knives up to that point, production knives, were stamped out of large sheets of steel. I said, by now I had been using a laser cutter in Phoenix to cut my blades out. I was the first knife maker to have any parts made, cut out by laser. I said, and I told Sal, I said, you can get the parts cut by laser. Don't worry about that. I can turn you on to a company. There's lots of people that could do it. I said, okay. But the ATS 34 was an expensive steel also. He said, what other requirements do you have? I said, basically, I would like it to be a liner lock, because that's my signature. That's Michael Walker's signature. No other knife made by production anywhere in the world had a liner lock. None. This was the first knife to use a liner lock, first production knife to use ATS 34 steel, first production knife to have the blades cut out by laser, and first production knife after this anodized aluminum to use G10. We started about a year later, we started using G10 on this. And once again, it was the first production knife ever to use G10. So Sal said, okay, we'll do all those things. And we looked around for somebody, and we found Nobody wanted to make it. None of the companies, Western, Camillus, nobody wanted to even try making a liner lock. So we found Les Diaz's, who had previously had Pacific Cutlery, and he wanted to open up a little knife shop.
So for you guys that don't know, Pacific Cutlery turned into Gerber Knives? No, Benchmade.
No, they went bankrupt. Pacific went bankrupt. I'll tell you what they did turn it into. Les Diaz's had Pacific, and they went bankrupt. He lost that company, and we got hold of him in between, and he agreed to make the knives. And he set up a little shop in Portland, I believe it was, Portland, Oregon. And the story gets complicated after that, but basically, this knife, the C15 from Spyderco, was the first knife that the Benchmade Knife Company ever made. And the Benchmade Knife Company now has become, everybody knows them as really high quality, very finely made, excellent pocket knives. But this was the first one, and they got their start with the Terzuola C15 for Spyderco.
So Bob Terzuola and Sal Glesser basically started Benchmade. You guys were the impetus for Benchmade.
We gave them the kit to start it.
Yep.
Yeah, and they actually started off as a little storefront in Portland with a workbench, and I believe there were 3 guys putting the knife parts together. That was it.
That could be the origin of the name. They were made on the bench.
Benchmade, yeah.
After another quick break, so we're going to talk about a bunch of you have some of your older knives here, but you also have some of the newer production knives. So we're going to look at that. Let's look at some of the knives you've made, because I know you've got a handful of them out here, and they're down here on the table so that you guys can see. But go ahead and show us the ones you've got here.
Okay, this is Susan's knife. Now, I had made it originally for Assistant Attorney General of the state of New Mexico, John Grubasic. And Susie saw it on the workbench, and she said, "I want it." So what could I do? It's now Susan's knife.
I can't argue with her.
This is the Model 36 Battlemate, and this was the next knife I designed after the second knife I designed after the Model 30. It's very similar, but it's larger, heavier, it has a bolster, and this was the Kydex type of sheath that I designed. Actually, I was the first one to really use Kydex back in 1982.
Because, you were like doing a heat molded Kydex sheath.
Yeah. Tom Maringer and I both came to the same guild show in Kansas City with molded Kydex sheaths, and we were the first ones to use Kydex as a sheath material. So, and here's another Kydex one. These are experimental knives that I designed, built as prototypes. This was like a little survival knife type of thing. Didn't go very far. Never got into production.
How long ago was that?
No, this was, I don't know, 84, maybe 85.
So here's the thing I want to point out, guys, like the things that Bob has brought to the market. You see this? These are things you're seeing now that people are trying to, that people are trying to say, oh, look what we did. This was when again?
Probably 85, maybe, it could have been 86, somewhere around there.
Those are hex.
You know, let me tell you something. People show me pictures of knives online. They said, "Can you tell me when this knife was made and how many of them you made and why you designed this?" And back in the day, in the 80s, knife makers, we weren't really thinking of the history of these things. We were trying to make a living. We were trying to put our kids through school, pay the mortgage, and so forth. We didn't spend a lot of time recording and keeping track of things and filing away information and stuff. We just wanted to get knives out there and make some money, and just put the groceries on the table. So it's kind of difficult remembering, when did you make that knife? I can give you basically within maybe a 5 or 8 year period, but not much better than that.
Yeah, but what I was saying is the things that people think are innovations now are things that you had already thought of. Those having a hex, being able to slide a hex nut in there and using the handle, like some knives have now that they think is a big innovation, that was 30, 40 years ago. You were already doing that.
Yeah, at least pretty close to 40.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say I'm 50.
35 years.
Yeah.
And some other prototypes. This was the prototype for that I made. I think his name was Per Lundgren. I'm not sure of the last name. He was the publisher of Paladin Press. Paladin Press published things like the Anarchist Cookbook and various military. They reprinted, what do they call them? Field manuals?
Field manuals.
Field
Yep. Paladin Press. They did the booby trap manual from Vietnam and those and released them through Paladin Press.
Per wanted some knives made for him. I think I made maybe a dozen. I can't remember how many of these. But once again, I don't remember. It says prototype on there, and I don't even think I put the date on there. But I think I made probably about 10 or 12 of these. This was the prototype. This was a production that I designed for, it was a military, the Marine Corps was having a competition for a bayonet. And I wanted to enter it, and I designed this. Camillus decided to produce some of them. It never went very far. It didn't get into the whole military thing, but this was basically the bayonet that I designed.
And that has an actual double edge. It has a sharpened swedge, and will actually cut as opposed to any bayonet I've ever seen before, which is really just a glorified club.
Correct. Yeah. And but I do have we did get a patent. I hold a patent on the sheath. The sheath basically was intended to be multi-use, not only to keep the bayonet, but also as a wire cutter. And I had the handle so that you didn't have to remove it from your belt. You could lean over and you could actually, can you see the wire cutter there?
Yeah.
There's the wire cutter.
It's like a mini set of bolt cutters built into it.
Yeah. And the other, and you could, there's a little tab on the side here. Press that tab and you can take this out. So it can be used without the sheath. And it has the two types of cutters. One for ribbon, which is like razor wire, shear, and the other is the compression type for cutting barbed wire. And a screwdriver for taking apart the bayonet or tightening it up. And it had a coated diamond sharpener on the edge so you could keep the bayonet nice and sharp.
Absolutely brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant, Bob.
So that's as far as that went. There are some production knives being made now. They're going to be out, we're hoping pretty soon, within the next month or so. Fox Cutlery in Italy, one of my favorite companies, is producing an ATCF OG. I think they're calling it the number one or something. All titanium, and it's got the thumb disc opener, which I invented for the ATCF, that disc on the top. And it's also a flipper. So this is what I call a double action, both a flipper or the one-handed thumb disc opener like that. And they'll be coming out, we hope, pretty soon. We're going to be marketing these in the United States, and Fox is going to be marketing them around the world. So that's the arrangement we made with them. It's liner lock, titanium, and Magna Cut steel on the blade.
Nice.
Yeah. And of course, I'm still making the ATCF customs.
which I've gotten to handle a few of them, and they are an incredible knife.
I've got 6 are going to be coming up soon, so I am doing those.
Now, I wanted to talk about, I know you've got it there, the 75 for 75. So the guys have seen a 75 for 75 on my channel. So I want to talk about this because this was something amazing that you did for your 75th birthday.
Never again. There will not be an 80 for 80. I promise you.
Maybe an 8 for 80?
Maybe 8 for 80, I don't know. But I actually made 75 of these for my 75th birthday. And it took a year. And one other thing that we did, because the 75th birthday, the stone is a diamond anniversary.
Yep.
And in the back of each one of the 75 knives has a little diamond.
Yep, set in the backspacer.
Set in the backspacer.
Well, actually, I had one that we picked up at a knife show, and Nico still has it, that had the diamond. It was a 75 for 75. It had the diamond in the pocket clip. It was set in the back of the pocket. It was the recurved one that you had done.
Yeah.
That was the show where you did the big Damasteel gold inlaid pizza cutter. If you remember that, that was
I remember that very well.
Was insane.
Yeah.
So
that made quite a hit at I think there was a tactical knife show. I can't remember either that or the Friday Night Blade Affair.
It was the Friday Night Blade Affair.
Yep. There's an airplane passing over.
I can edit it out. It's not that big a deal. I wanted to say, okay, so of all the knives you've made and designed, what one would you have to say stands out as either your favorite? What would stand out as your favorite, and what one would you say just has been the biggest pain to do or make?
The biggest pain?
Yeah. Like, what one would you say you're like, oh man, this is such a nightmare to do?
Boy, that's a hard question. Probably the most difficult of my designs are the Persian ones. Fitting the blade into the handle and grinding that curve that makes a Persian, that kind of gentle, beautiful, graceful curve. I would say that's probably the most challenging one, you know.
So what's your favorite one to make? What's your favorite knife of all the knives you made? What's your favorite one that you've made? What model, what design?
Boy, that's another hard one. It's hard. It's hard to pick one out. I just enjoy making the knives. The Eagle Rock, I think, is one that has given me a great deal of satisfaction. Now, the ATCF, you know, it's the most popular one. This is the one I've sold the most of, and I've been making it since. Once again, they asked me this question: when did you start doing that? Well, I think it was like 1987, 86 or 87, and I've never stopped making them ever since then, because it's in such high demand. You know, people have told me it's basically the perfect knife, perfect pocket knife, in terms of, you know, what you can carry around. For utility, for defense, it's a general all-around really good knife. The one that I really like the design of a whole lot, I'm really proud of, is the Eagle Rock, and we named that for the street that we lived on in Albuquerque. We lived on Eagle Rock Avenue, and when I moved down from Santa Fe to Albuquerque, I designed that knife as kind of a welcome to Albuquerque type of thing. But I really like the design. It's got a kind of a harpoon blade, they call it, a little up in the front.
It's I've got a picture of it somewhere, and I'll drop it in so you guys can see it. I'm sure I can find one online. I can just drop it in. It is a beautiful, beautiful knife.
Yeah, and it works really well.
Yeah. So
those are hard questions to answer.
Well, and I like to throw a couple of those questions in when I talk to any of the really well-known knife makers, because there's such a history there. That it's just one of those questions, like, what's the favorite design you've done? And what's, you know, and when I do live feeds, I like to ask people, like, if you could take any blade shape, any handle, any part from any knife, throw them together and not have to worry about the overall making it work, but like what would that knife look like? And that's one that when I would do live feeds and ask other knife makers, they're like, wow, I really wish you had me ask me that question. I wish you'd send it to me in email. I was like, it's a lot more fun to ask that question as kind of kind of throw it out there and make them like see them thinking about it. So so we talked about all this. We'll definitely talk about the folding knives. I'll see if I can borrow one of the prototypes when they start coming out. But what I want to kind of do is I want to do a quick shop tour so everybody can see you have got probably one of the best organized shops I've ever seen. So we're going to break to that. I'm going to retool how I've got this all set up. And you guys join us back in a minute, and we're going to take a look at how Bob's shop is all set up. Bob, just walk us through how you've got your shop set up, because it is very well organized.
Okay. Well, basically over here we have pretty much most of my storage, handle materials, blanks, all sorts of parts that need drawers and stuff. My heat treating furnace over there, bandsaws. And down this way we have what I call drill press row.
You can never, having made knives, you can never have too many drill presses.
Never have too many drill presses. These are two Bergmasters, very old, probably from these are both from the mid to early 50s. Dedicated drill press for the tapping head, Catmatic. And we got lights all over the place. Dedicated for deburring. One Bergmaster with all this. The second Bergmaster is only carbide drills for things like materials like G10 and carbon fiber. Mm-hmm. And this is for the standard titanium and wood and so forth. And my bigger drill press, this one came with me from Guatemala in 1984. And it's still really good. Solid drill press. Here's my workbench. Once again, you can never have too many storage drawers. I've got screws and bits and parts all over the place. Down here, basically the same thing. All sorts of parts and pieces and parts and parts. And I like to have all of my tools that I use frequently, like my calipers, rules, different kind of measuring devices, marking devices, within arm's reach, because I'm pretty lazy. I don't like traveling all over the shop.
It's not lazy, Bob. Everything. We called it economy of motion in the military.
Economy of motion, I call it laziness. Basically the same thing. Okay. So we got these here, and buffers, polishes. This is Scotch-Brite. I have 2 diamond cutoff wheels. A lot of people have asked me, how do you do the little notches at the top of the blade, like the on the thumb ramp?
The jimping.
And so I do it over here. I don't know if you can see this little finger here. Mm-hmm. See that little spring finger? Yep. I'll cut one.
And then use that as the guide for the next one?
Set it in for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And it gives me evenly spaced notches all along the top of the thumb ramp. That's what I use right there.
And these are basically the same kind of diamond wheels you'd use for cutting jade and stone and things like that, right? They could be used
for jade, yeah. They're resin bonded diamond.
Yeah, and that's what you had said. There was just such a correlation between the tools that knife makers were using and in the jade jewelry industry.
And let me tell you, diamond has come in really handy working with MagnaCut, because MagnaCut is very difficult to finish. To get scratches out when getting down to the very finer grits and so forth. And I found that it's easiest if I actually use a diamond belt. And these look they're pretty well used, but they last a long time. I use them wet. Mm-hmm. And the final finish on the MagnaCut I'll do with the diamond belt. It gives me a nice polish that I can then put into the tumbler.
And then over here, grinders, lots of grinders.
This is where I use the diamond. Let me put a light on here so you can see that a little bit better. This is not diamond; those the other ones are.
Is that a Trizac?
This is a Trizac belt. But when I am using the diamond, what I'll do is set up a sponge here at the top, and I have
An IV bottle, yeah.
an IV bottle, and that'll drip right into the sponge. Oh, here's the other one. I got the sponge right here. It'll drip right into the sponge, and I can, if I control the water flow, it won't splatter very much. It'll just keep the belt kind of damp.
I'm stealing that idea, Bob, because
You can steal it.
I'm getting ready to make another knife.
Okay. Here's another idea you can steal. This is my dust collector. It's just a 20-inch box fan.
Sucking it through a furnace filter.
Furnace filter. And you can take a look at it. You can see it's already kind of dusty and dirty.
Yeah.
Getting ready to change that.
Luckily, my grinder is outside.
Yeah, 20
So-
by 20.
Yeah.
Horizontal grinder. This is an AMK. I really like it a lot. It's very solid, very functional, and I use it for just about everything that has to be done horizontally, including some really small cuts with using a half-inch.
Mhm.
And I recommend these two are variable speed. I really recommend you have at least one variable speed grinder.
Yeah.
They're more expensive.
It's always good because as you go up in grit, you need to go down in speed.
Yeah.
To manage the
Right.
the friction and the heat.
And you may notice that all of my major grinders here, 1, 2, 3, I got the Platen grinder, the 8-inch, and the other 8-inch. They're all Burr Kings, and Burr King is one of the sponsors for that series, A Sharp Life. They helped sponsor that. One of the reasons why I really like Burr King a lot is because, as far as I know, they're the only grinder that has a front wheel drive. Most other grinders are driven
From the back.
from the back, and the front wheel is really just an idler wheel, which is run by the belt. But Burr King actually runs the front wheel, which means that I can change this wheel into a large Scotch-Brite wheel. I can turn it into a grinding wheel, which I do for jade, diamond, various kinds of grits and polishing wheels. I have a good variety of those that fit right here on this one or the other one, and I can use it directly as a buffer or polisher.
It just gives you more capabilities in a shop with the same amount of
A
equipment.
lot more flexibility, yeah. And of course, I've always said that Burr Kings are the Cadillac of grinders. I mean, they are. I've had most of these. I've had these two since 1987.
Wow.
Maybe 1986. I've never had any problem. Never had to change a bearing. Never did anything.
That's
they
impressive.
just keep. They're industrial workhorses. What they are. Flat plate and grinder. This is what I call my machine bench. I've got a whole bunch of different machines here. Polisher. This is a high-speed little drill press I use for shadow boxing.
Mm-hmm.
This is a thickness sander. I can put a vacuum up here, and this table moves up and down. And inside is a drum with sandpaper.
Mm-hmm.
So I can run, if I have to make a spacer, for example, that's a couple of thousandths thinner than the material that I've got. I can just run it through here, take off just a couple of thousandths at a time. Very handy. This is my flat disc sander. I have various wheels that can come on here.
You've got that hook to a vacuum.
So hook to a vacuum. I have a lot of vacuums in the
Well,
shop.
yeah,
They're
it's you can.
all over the place.
It was obvious. I was like, when I walked in, I was like, he's got to have vacuums on everything because there's just it's for as much work as you do in here. It's
Here we
very
go.
clean.
Yeah, I've got this.
Yeah.
Let me get in front of you here.
Sorry.
This is actually a Wells dental engine, is what they call it. And the nice thing about this, got all these drums and everything. You can do a quick change like this.
Oh, that is.
Put one back in. Where is it? Right there, and I've got all these
Different sized
kinds of
drums.
brushes and
Yeah.
drums and so forth. You can change them while you're working. Makes a nice little buffer.
And it's not loud.
No, it's not.
That's a
loud at
very
all.
quiet machine.
It's made for a dental laboratory.
Yeah.
You know. So,
Now, I had a question for you, and I'm looking at this here. Is this a paper wheel?
yes.
So that and now I've told people this for years that's why the edges on your knives have got a different feel than a lot of other knives. And because me being a sharpener, I knew that you were using a paper wheel. So what's the benefit? Like, I know the benefit. But what's the benefit that you find using a paper wheel as one of the final steps?
When I put an edge on a knife, be it a resharpening or right from the beginning, when the initial edge being created, I'll do it on the grinder.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I'll use either the A45 or the A30 Trizac belt, and that'll give me a nice even cut all the way along the edge. Now that'll create a burr. It'll create what they call a wire edge sometimes, or a burr, and that's what I look for. If you hold it in just the right position, you can see this bright white line right along the edge, and that means you've got an even burr or wire edge all the way along the edge. Okay, you got to take that off. And I found the best way to do it was with a hard paper wheel. And they call it paper. It's cardboard. I don't know. It's a very dense material. I use this is basically a triple E compound. I like it. It's a white diamond. It's become very hard to find with the triple X white diamond. I've had one where I have just a little piece left, probably for 20 years. And I just put it on here in this cardboard or paper. If you hold the knife in just the right position and then flip it over, it'll take off that wire edge without compromising the sharpness of that edge. And that's why I like the wire wheel.
It's a really crisp edge.
Mm-hmm.
You get the benefit of it's kind of a polished edge, but you also get the benefit of it doesn't like rub down. It doesn't burnish off the
And then,
the
of
tube.
course, I test the edge. I test the edge on my magazines. You can see here how I test the edges.
Magazine paper is one of the best ways. It's a really good matrix for testing sharpness.
It's clay. They call clay coated stock. Yeah.
You can also use it, and I've said this before, you can also use clay-coated paper like that, newsprint, stuff like that, as an improvised strop compound. Sometimes for some steels, it works really, really well.
Yeah.
So, and then
the
this
we got all sorts of.
is this just kind of like a Bob's little tinker area right here?
Well, kind of. It's the preparation area for the milling machine. I've got all my milling collets here. And if you look at the top, these are all fixtures that I built for various procedures and different practices that I have to do on the milling machine. This is my milling machine. It's been with me since Santa Fe. It's not CNC. It's all hand operated.
That is a hefty, big mill you got there, Bob.
Yeah, it's a good heavy one. I really like it a lot.
And that's one of the, like, I understand CNC makes things easier, but the fact is knowing how to run a mill and do it well and have a good final end product is something that's kind of going away.
Well,
And you make everything here, right? Everything on your knives pretty much is made here in the shop,
except for the water jet.
except for the water jet. So you make your own screws?
Generally, no.
Okay.
I can show you some screws made of gold that I
Yeah, I
do
know.
make.
I know that you have made gold screws.
Yeah.
I was going to touch on that.
It's not worth it to make screws. The
Yeah.
screws that I use, most of them, all the pivot screws come from Steve Kelly, which is tie connectors.
Yeah, he pretty
Let me
much
show you what
makes
my-
most of the best all around knife.
This is basically what my knives start out as. Here's the handle parts. And here are the blades.
Yep. Wow.
That's how I begin. And it's what I call generic shapes. I can make any shape of the knives that I'm making, my own personal knives, what we call the customs. I can make all of them from this shaped blade and all of them from that shaped handle.
Yeah.
Once again, storage all over the place.
Yeah. But I mean, you guys have got to realize this is a 3-car garage.
This is a
all of
three-car garage. Yeah.
This is what you just saw is all crammed into a 3-car garage, including blast booth,
Sandblaster,
tumbling
tumbling.
for stone wash.
Every shop should have a sink.
Every shop should have a sink.
This
Finishing
is
for
this is the chemical bench.
for
I've got ferric chloride,
ferric chloride for etching blades.
etching blades,
Wakes
wings,
rust
I've got,
remover.
blackener,
Um,
sodium bicarbonate.
but you don't typically do a lot of anodizing though, do you?
Not of different colors. The anodizing I do, generally speaking, for my knives, is in the bronze,
Yeah.
brownish area, and that's this.
Yeah, that's your power supply. I mean, I know you do the bronze, but you're not like a lot of us. We do like the bright, brilliant blues and stuff like that. In
Some
some,
of us do this.
The other
yeah,
thing
I would
we
say
do-
I do this.
Susie
I do
does.
all the high-end anodizing for our openers and stuff.
Yeah. So
And I use.
yeah, I do the low end anodizing. She does the high end anodizing.
Isn't that the story of our life?
That's the story of our life. Yeah.
and then on the walls is just a history of knife making throughout the years.
And then we have the door,
The door.
which you have to sign.
I have to sign the door.
Why doesn't Bob hold that while you sign the door?
I'll sign the door.
Here, let Bob hold it and you sign the door. There's a piece of marker. There you go.
Sign the door.
Uh-huh.
Where am I going to sign the door? I think I'll sign it right here. What's today's date? I can't see that.
It is the
Is it March?
6th. March 6th.
So when we first moved to California, I had a container full of equipment, tools, machines, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And we rented an apartment. We were looking for a house. We didn't have a house yet. We rented an apartment, and we had a shop in an industrial compound. And we had met a few people, Rick Clow, Adam Jacobs,
Ben,
Ben Stone.
All people that you have met and seen on the channel, ladies and
Exactly.
gentlemen.
Yeah. And they volunteered to help me move and empty out the container and set up the shop and so forth. We had this door in that warehouse, basically. So they extemporaneously just grabbed a marker and signed it. And somewhere it says up there, first day crew. I'm not exactly sure where. There've been so many people.
Yeah.
So when we left that industrial park and moved up here to the shop, we took the door with us. So that door is now part of history, and we have all of our visitors sign the door, and they've
Yeah.
been doing it for
Remember.
years.
So we didn't look at these. So you've got several
lathes.
lathes here and a bandsaw, which absolutely That's my least favorite tool in any shop is bandsaw.
These two lathes are Derbyshires, made in America. Very, very precise watchmakers lathes. Very, they're really exact.
Yeah.
Very, very. They're probably the most precise lathes made in the United States. A Derbyshire, and this one is a Schaublin, which is one of the world's most precise and accurate lathes. This is the Schaublin Model 70. And this comes out of Switzerland. So I've got 3 very precise lathes and one which is okay. It's not great, but it's bigger and I can use it for slightly heavier work.
It's like my filmography. This is the my filmography of the knife world.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. Yeah, these are, so if you guys follow a lot of the watchmaking channels, they call them the watchmaker's turns. Super, super precise lathes.
Yeah, this is a setup that I made for cutting off pivots, stainless steel pivots.
Yeah.
I make my own pivots.
You make your own pivots.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, well, guys, this has been an incredible shop tour. Bob, thank you very much for spending the day with us. We're going to get some B-roll footage and stuff of you doing a little bit of stuff, something fancy that we're going to throw in, set to music. So,
And maybe I'll even tell you a true story about Sal Glesser and myself.
all right, guys, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to get I'll do an outro in this. This will be broke up into a handful of videos. Bob, thanks for giving us the time out of your day.
Thanks for being here, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. Guys, we'll turn this around and do some final thoughts, and I'll send you out about your day. So I know that we already had the intro and everything, but Bob, you guys have got a series that you're doing. It's a 12-part series that people can purchase that basically walks you step by step, correct? Through the process of making a knife.
Right. We call it A Sharp Life. And it's basically my book on video. And what we did, we made a, like I said, 12-part series. Took this book that I wrote.
Which I have a copy of it at house. Thank you very much, sir.
And chose step by step the materials, the procedures, a little shop tour, which was very quick and not very comprehensive, but okay. And all the processes and the different tools and machines that I use to make an ATCF. We did it from scratch, literally from scratch. No CAD files, no computer generated anything. And it took 2 weeks to film. And it was quite an exciting project. And we've got that coming out pretty soon.
And so that's going to be,
Yeah,
it's on your own website, right?
This is my director, my producer, my editor, the woman who keeps me upright.
Or as I like to say about my wife, the one that tolerates me for this period of time.
Well, I worked in the movies for years, movies and television for years. So when the writer's strike came out and we were about to film this with a crew from LA, and the guys were such jerks that I didn't want to use them if I could help it. And it wasn't not that they were so high priced, they were dying for work because the writer's strike had stopped everything. So I called my buddies from New Mexico, and they came, and they were happy to come because they were collectors of Bob's knives.
And it was a professional film crew.
yeah,
I mean, they had. You should have seen their shop. I mean, you think the shop is organized now? They had 3 cameras, tripods all over the place, lights, cables, wires. I mean, it was treacherous walking from one place to the other.
Anyway, but they did a great job, and I wanted it to be intimate. I didn't want it to look like a Hollywood set, which is why we chose to do it here. We could have done it on some sort of set, but I wanted people to feel like they were in the shop with Bob. And so, in fact, I wanted to call it "Cut It Out, Bob," but I got voted down.
You got voted down. That wasn't going to work.
So, but it was fun, and it was a lot of work for Bob. And the first episode of it is kind of flat because for the first time he had 2 giant cameras in his face as he was talking, and I think he was very self-conscious of that.
You got to remember, I was facing 2 weeks filming with a professional crew with no script. Okay, there wasn't any.
You had a script?
There wasn't any,
Screenplay.
but nobody wrote down a script saying, you know, it was holding up cue cards and things. You know, none of that. It was all. It literally was all extemporaneous. You know.
But I think he wrote the script about 40 years ago.
Yeah,
You know,
a little
he's
bit,
been making
yeah.
knives for a long time.
So that I'll have a link to that website where it's going to be available. And what's the price right now? The current price?
Price is $130, and that's an introductory price. It's going to go up, but for now, for at least a month, it'll be $130.
So, and that's going to give them, they can go back and that's going to give them blanket access to that for
Lifetime access
Oh yeah, all
through our website.
12
And
episodes.
you have to have a password. You have to have a couple passwords to get in because of sharing passwords. We've been forewarned. And it's really, you can't, I've watched the footage so much. I joke that I didn't believe in purgatory until I was given 150 hours of raw footage of Bob making a knife. And so after editing, working with the editor and picking cuts and going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, I know what purgatory is. I now have a new sense of what it is. I had none before. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I literally did not know a lot of things about knife making, and I've lived with them for 20 years. And now I know. Now I can tell you start to finish how to make a knife and the geometry of a liner lock folder. I really get it. For years I thought, well, what if something happened to Bob and I had to help him in his shop? I wouldn't know what to do. Now I do, but I'm not coming. I'm not
gonna do
coming to the shop. No.
So yeah, that, I mean, $130, you guys can't beat that. So, like I said, I'll have a link to that. So
Terzuola.net.
yeah, Terzuola.net. There'll be a link to it down below.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, the price is going to go up and it's absolutely something that, knowing Bob, it's something you're going to want to see. So,
Thank you.
Shop talk.
Well, Shop Talk isn't open. We started a Zoom membership sort of call once a week today. In fact, we're going to film it today, where knife makers could sign up and they could have a one-on-one with Bob and sort of a coaching thing. And we did it for a short time, just for a year. And so every Wednesday they get a Zoom call, and then we do 2 deep dive videos, which are much more even extensive than a Sharp Life. We're on certain things.
Very
because we-
narrowly focused.
is that's still available? They can
It is
sign up.
not. There's a waiting list now.
Okay. So
we'll
yeah, get on the waiting
get
list,
on
guys.
the waiting list if you want to be part of it, because Bob doesn't want to distill it so much that there's so many people that he can't get to them. But they ask all kinds of questions, and he prepares from the questions the week before. Then he gets things ready for the next week to show them how he does whatever procedure they asked about.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go, guys. Go ahead and check that out. All right. Now we've got something else that we're planning on doing. There you go, guys. That was an incredible day to spend with a guy that I really, really enjoy his company. And the fact is, he knows more about knife making than any 6 people combined. You're never going to find more of a wealth of knowledge than Bob Terzuola. I'm not going to tell you about all the stuff you can do to support the channel, because that's not what this is about. I wanted to do this for Bob, and definitely go check out his 12-part series on his website. You're not going to find a better price. It's like getting to sit down with the master at his craft one-on-one, and he's going to walk you through that 12-step set video series of making a knife. So guys, that's it. I love you all. Keep it clean in the comments section and stand by, because here comes that B-roll. Tell me the story about you and Sal Glesser.
The first time I met Sal was at the New York Knife Show in, I think it was 1982. And he had a table across the aisle from me, so I could see him all weekend long. He had his, he was selling his sharp makers, the triangular ceramic with the base where you could sharpen a knife straight up and down like that. And he had a table full of all kinds of knives, big knives, small knives, folding knives, chef's knives, hunting knives, and axes and chisels and woodworking tools and the whole thing, to show how he could sharpen everything, all of these. So all weekend long, I'm selling my knives. I sold a couple very nicely. And he'd, when things were a little bit slow, he'd find somebody walking in front of the table and he'd say, "Sir, do you have a knife in your pocket?" Being a knife show, the probability is really high that the person had a knife in their pocket. So Sal would say, "Let me take a look at it. Maybe we can put a nice edge on it, the man would hand him his knife, and he'd take out his jeweler's loop. Now, Sal was a real showman. He's a carny showman. He's a great guy. He'd take out his jeweler's loop, and with a great flourish, he would look at the edge of the knife and test it and look, and he says, oh, this needs some sharpening here. So he'd start sharpening on his sharp maker, and he'd be talking at the same time, giving the demonstration. Now, right next to him, he had a pile of paper cut out from Time magazine or Newsweek, that clay-coated, slick paper, and they were about maybe 3 inches wide by the full length of the 8 inches, I guess. And he had a pile of them there. And he would sharpen the guy's knife, and then he'd take that piece of paper, one piece of paper with the guy's knife, and he'd start slicing it and slicing it, make little circles and make little designs and cut little figures out of it and so forth. And of course, people were really, by now people had gathered round, and he would invariably sell a couple of these knife sharpeners. So at the end of the show, I packed up my table and I walked around and I introduced myself and I said, I'm Bob Terzuola. I said, I'd like to compliment you on your presentation. I said, it's really effective. I've seen you sell a lot of those, and it's a pleasure to see somebody work like that. He said, you know, the sharpeners are really good. He says, I won't deny that. We designed them ourselves and we can do that. He says, I can pick up a piece of paper and I can do these cuts and everything with any knife on the table. You know, and he'd pick up a chef's knife and show me. Got another piece of paper. He said, I can do it with the back of the knife. And he'd turn the knife upside down, the back part, and he'd do the same thing. He'd cut these little circles and little strips, and I'm watching. He says, I can do it with another piece of paper. And he'd take the second piece of paper, and he'd do it like that, and he'd slice the paper. He said, the secret is knowing how to cut paper, not sharpening a knife. And I never, ever forgot that lesson. Keep your eye on the ball. Let you know what it is you're actually looking at.